Roof Piece is finally just a 1v1. Luffy is taking on Kaido alone. And first off, I just want to give some props to Kaido because I feel like we've kind of overlooked how much he's taken on. This man first took on 9 scabbards, told them they're weak, and then just hit them like a bunch of baseballs. Then he went 2v5 against the Supernova where he was mainly the focus. And after taking on all that damage, it took Luffy learning Advanced Conqueror's Haki to have a chance of defeating him. And let's not forget he's been literally lifting an entire island by himself during this whole time. So yeah, let's not diminish Kaido just because of how quickly Luffy has grown, but nevertheless it is finally just the two of them on the roof. So in this video I want to discuss what is next for Zoro and Law, who just left the roof, because Kid and Killer, who also left, kind of have their thing set up already. Killer is fighting Hawkins and Kid is going after Big Mom. Zoro and Law on the other hand is kind of unclear exactly what they're gonna be up to. And well, first off, I think the best thing they could do right now is subscribing to the channel to make sure they don't miss a future upload. And also, of course, smashing that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Now, realistically, the odds of that might be a little low, so let's just analyze their situation first. And well, as of right now, one of the main reasons why it's so difficult to predict what they're gonna do next is the fact that they're both kind of hurt. Law did take a Thunder Bagua from Kaido, but Zoro, on the other hand, is pretty much unconscious at this point. So I think most people do expect them to be out of action for a little bit, but at the end of the day, they will have another role to play and probably will get in more action as well. Because not only are they two of the most popular characters in the story and they can't be sitting out the rest of the war, but also the fights haven't really begun. It's been really a lot of preliminary clashes where the damage doesn't matter as much. Luffy is a prime example. He's been knocked out a few times and now he's going toe to toe with Kaido. But even like the Scabbards got bodied by Kaido and then some mysterious figure patched them up a bit, and now two of them are getting in fights already. So Law and Zoro are definitely not done, but Zoro definitely needs some time to rest and Law probably has to heal him a bit. And not only that, he probably has to kind of look after him to make sure no enemies approach. After all, we did get that moment from Law earlier where he was like, it's not worth you dying to win this war. So despite how cold Law seems on the outside, he really does love the Straw Hats. But yeah, honestly, I do think they'll be sidelined for a while, which is why I put Act 4 in the thumbnail. If there is an Act 4 where this war really escalates, I think that's when Law and Zoro will get back into action. And when that actually happens, I do expect the both of them to kind of split off in their own ways. When I'm looking at all the possibilities of what each of them could be up to in the future, I don't really see them going on the same path. So I think after Zoro is healed up a bit, I do think Oda is gonna split them up. That could happen in a number of ways. One easy way is Zoro getting lost, which Oda has used before to pretty much get Zoro wherever he wants him to be. So it could easily be a scenario where in the midst of chaos, Zoro kind of wanders off by himself, or like he turns in the opposite direction and Law gets pissed, and that's how they end up separating. But another scenario that I could see is Law seeing something that he wants to go after. Specifically, I think Law seeing the CP0 might cause him to act on his own, and by that time Zoro might be a little better, so Zoro can kind of stand alone, and that way Law can go off on his own as well. But yeah, one way or another, I do think they're gonna split up, so let's just start by discussing Law and what he's gonna do. So for Law and his role in the story, early on it was a pretty big theory that he's gonna end up dying in Wano, because not only do you have the immortality operation that has to come back into play, but also the tragedy of Act 3 that everybody keeps speculating about. Now, one thing I do want to quickly touch on is that this tragedy of Act 3, it's not like an established thing that has to happen. It's just that so many people, myself included, have made theories on this that we kind of think it must happen. But overall, we don't even know if Wano is structured like a kabuki, and not all Act 3s have to end on a tragedy. Plus, like, Ashura Doji might be dead, so like that might have been it. But yeah, as far as Law dying, I do feel like that theory overall has kind of lost a lot of steam. Personally, I never thought he was gonna die because I thought he had a bigger role in the story. In his last conversation with Sengoku, it really felt like Sengoku told him that Corazon would just want him to keep living. And now recently, he's kind of discovered a new purpose where he wants to figure out the will of D. So with that being his new goal, I do think Law is gonna end up surviving Wano. But one thing that could kind of coincide with that goal are the CP0. Because not only do the world government know a lot of secrets, but the CP0 and what they're after right now could tie into what Law is after. Obviously right now the CP0 are just chilling, waiting for the pirates to take each other out, but they're definitely just waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Wano has a lot of goods that they're after, with not only the Sea Stone, but also the Road Poneglyph. And of course Law this whole time has been looking for the Road Poneglyph, so they might end up crossing paths. And even in general, if Law does see them acting in some way, he might want to follow them to try to keep track of what they're doing. One thing to remember is that Law does have multiple connections to the world government, point, not only as a former warlord, but also his hometown of Flevens got screwed over by the world government. So honestly, the CP0 might be the best group of people for Law to interact with, because when we're looking at this war right now, most people are getting fight matchups, but low-key we're kind of running out of major opponents for the Alliance to fight. Like all the commanders, all the Tobi Roppo are kind of locked up into something or a fight, so overall I don't really see a main opponent for Law to fight, and CP0 might be it. I do think the CP0 are going to be very strong, they're not going to be weak, so if Law ends up going against all three of them, I don't know if that's really a fair fight. So honestly, with this Law and CP0 action, it might just be a quick clash or some kind of stealth mission. Now I'm not taking out the possibility that Law fights one of these CP0 members, because it would be pretty hype if that main guy does take his mask off and we see what he looks like, and he ends up being pretty strong, which would kind of hype up Lucci and Kaku. So yeah, if Law is gonna get a 1v1 matchup, I feel like that main CP0 guy might be it. But on the other hand, I do think it's very likely that Law just kind of tracks them down to try to prevent whatever they're doing. CP0 and Orochi have to meet back up as well, so maybe Law sees that and like tries to figure out what they're doing. I do believe Orochi and the CP0 ended up agreeing on a deal, and Vegapunk and the SSG might be coming to Wano. So that could be one thing Law gets information on and tries to prevent it, and then eventually that leads to like Kaido's road poneglyph or something like that. Actually, now that I think about it, Orochi might know where Kaido's road poneglyph is, so honestly he might offer up that info to CP0 to guarantee his own safety. So honestly for Law, I really do feel like he's gonna get involved with the CP0 and end up like finding the road poneglyph and preventing the CP0 from getting their hands on it. Because if that doesn't happen, I really don't see who else Law could potentially fight. Now there's the other option of the fight really escalating, maybe Luffy loses and Onigashima like drops on Wano. Then in that case I could kind of see Law teaming up with Chopper just to make sure everyone is okay, but I still do feel like he needs a bigger role where he shines individually. So right now for Law, I'm gonna lock in the theory that he clashes with the CP0. Now Zoro on the other hand, now that I think about it, could tie into Law's plot as well, because Zoro does have a connection to Orochi where he does want to kill Orochi. That's something that was set up from a while back, and it's possible Hiyori might be on Onigashima as well. That mysterious figure that healed up the scabbers, that's still either Toki or Hiyori. Yes, I've completely given up on Vista. But yeah, if Hiyori is on Onigashima, she could definitely meet back up with Zoro. We get more Zoro and Hiyori scenes, which hey, I'll be honest, I'm all for that ship. But yeah, if the two of them end up seeing Orochi, that could kind of be their next goal. If Orochi's devil fruit works in a way where you essentially have to kill him 8 times, it does mean he only has 1 life left. So honestly, that might be set up for Zoro and Hiyori to kill him, which will work out for Zoro because he's not at full power. Now I will say, Orochi I feel like definitely has something up his sleeve. Oda's brought him back to life once already, I think he's gonna do it again. There's no way after all this he just gets easily bodied by Zoro. So even though Orochi's not gonna be a tough opponent, he's still gonna pose some problems in some way. But I don't think that's gonna be a major struggle for Zoro in terms of like fighting. I think it's gonna be more of like maneuvering in between things just to try to get to Orochi. So even if this Orochi thing happens, I do think Zoro should have one more major fight. Now you might be saying Zoro's gotten a lot of shine on the rooftop already, he's done a lot, but think about it, pretty much all the Straw Hats are just getting into their fights, including Luffy. There is no way Zoro is not gonna get a second chance to fight and shine. Yes, he's very injured right now, but honestly that's when he shines the most. The fights where he's down bad and suffers a lot of damage, those are the best Zoro fights. Plus there's the fact that Zoro really wasn't even happy with what he did on the rooftop. He let out his strongest attack and he was kind of disappointed that he wasn't able to do more. Add on the fact that he knows that he has Conqueror's Haki now, and that's another way for him to power up, there's no way Zoro doesn't get another major fight. So although I think this Orochi thing is likely to happen, Zoro has to have another big fight afterwards. And when it comes down to it, the only 2 options I see are King and Kaido. We'll start with King because this was actually the matchup a lot of people saw for Zoro, because you have the fight hierarchy of Luffy fighting the strongest and Zoro fighting the second strongest and Sanji fighting the third strongest, which would essentially match up King and Zoro, plus the fact that King is a swordsman as well makes sense for Zoro. So early on in Wano, most people thought this fight was gonna happen, but recently a lot of people just don't want to see this fight at all. And just for transparency, King versus Zoro was what I initially predicted a while back, but then once Zoro reached the rooftop, I did think he was gonna end up fighting Kaido and that King and Zoro wasn't gonna happen. And to be honest, I still think it's more likely Zoro goes back and fights Kaido, but the possibility of him fighting King is still very good, and honestly it'll be a pretty hype fight. It's crazy to me how many people have been sleeping on King recently, simply because he's been a victim of screen time and hasn't gotten gotten a lot of shine, which in certain scenarios like a Eustace kid, that kind of criticism makes sense. But King was literally introduced in this arc and the arc is nowhere near done. We have to be patient with this stuff. In my opinion, there's no way King is gonna be weak. Do we really think Kaido, this person that recruits all the strongest people into his crew, is gonna have a weak right hand? Maybe you don't want to call him his right hand, but his top commander is gonna be weak? I absolutely don't think so, especially because Oda has set up some pretty interesting stuff for King. He's another character that's very mysterious. He's got this mask on, so we don't actually know what he looks like. He's part of this very unique race, one of 3 races that Big Mom doesn't have. There's also theories around whether or not he's from Impel Down originally because of his uniform. So Oda has already set up interesting things with King that he's absolutely gonna go back to. It's just that so far it's not his time to shine yet. Like, people are bringing up Marco versus King and Queen and how Marco's handling them, but that was a moment for Marco to shine and make him look dope. And even despite that, he literally says himself, I can't keep this up for any longer. Marco is not gonna be able to take them both on by himself, especially when they both have hybrid forms in their bag. So yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I really just want to make it clear that King versus Zoro, don't be disappointed by it before it even happens, because I do think there's a good chance that it does still happen and it could be very hype. But despite all that, I actually don't think that's the most likely option for Zoro, because Marco versus King is a very good option. Now, narrative wise, I wouldn't say Marco versus King has more to it than Zoro versus King. It's just that with Marco, I don't really see another role for him in Wano. There's not really another opponent that he could take on besides like Big Mom and Kaido. And I guess like you could say Kid's gonna end up losing to Big Mom, but with how unpredictable Big Mom is right now, I don't think anybody's gonna take her on 1v1. She's got her own agenda. She's got a lot of conflicted thoughts right now. She's an absolute wild card. So for Marco, I do think he should get a fight, and the one that makes the most sense is King. Unless Oda does something drastic like Marco dying, which would be wild, but it's not impossible. But yeah, unless that happens, I do see him fighting King. So now Zoro, on the other hand, needs another opponent or chance to shine, and I feel like Kaido is still the best option. Now you might say he did get his big moment against Kaido already, creating that new scar, but again, I really don't feel like that was enough. Zoro even said it himself that he was unhappy with the attack. Plus, with all this buildup about no samurai as great as Odin, that moment just didn't feel big enough. Like, first off, Kaido's reaction, he was shocked about the Conqueror's Haki, but he didn't really show any respect to Zoro. He says the attack is gonna leave a scar, which should be good enough for you. It wasn't a moment of recognition of like, oh wow, you're just as strong as Odin, finally another great samurai. On the other hand, even the attack itself, the scar that we see, it was on like this tiny ass panel. So it felt like a very minor moment, and that definitely did not feel like Zoro's big moment against Kaido. So honestly, I do feel like in the meantime, Zoro kind of deals with Orochi, goes through some loops and fights him and kills him maybe, but eventually he goes back to the rooftop and gets another shot at Kaido. Now I will say I've consistently said Luffy is the one to defeat Kaido, so when Zoro goes back to Kaido, I can see 2 different scenarios. First off, maybe by then Luffy has already done significant damage. It could either be he's essentially won against Kaido and Zoro comes in with this one final blow, or he's done like significant damage to Kaido and then Zoro comes in and they fight Kaido together. The other option I see is Zoro going up and fighting Kaido with Luffy, and then after Zoro finally gets his big moment and launches this huge attack on Kaido, Luffy kind of takes over and wins the battle. So with Zoro, the most likely option I think right now is going back to fight Kaido, but I don't think the King fight is unlikely, and I do think it will be pretty hype. Like, if you're a Zoro fan, do not be so caught up in these headcanon ideas of what Zoro's gonna do. I think one way or another Zoro's gonna get some epic moments, so just be patient and wait for it to happen because it's gonna be hype. But I'm definitely interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. But as always, thank you guys for watching. If you had a good time, drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell as well to not miss an upload. Thank you all to my King Pirates Elite members on YouTube and Patreon for supporting the channel. Check me out on Twitter. I'm DZack, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.